Welcome to Lesser Known Operators on the Go. This is the truncated version of episode 79 with Jesus Negron, first group sergeant major. Hope you guys enjoyed this new format. As always, brought to you by Precision Wellness Group for your hormone therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, peptides. It's one-stop shop down there with Dr. Taylor Bosley. Give them a shout. They're down in Southern Pines, telemedicine, or in person. We're also brought to you by Alpha Elite Performance. Get your supplements for the gym. Use code LKO15 at checkout to save 15%. Let me know what you guys think in this new format in the comments. I do appreciate you guys very much. Be good. And I said, what? Yeah, well, some of the issues you're describing here is there's no one left from September 10th, 2001. There's nobody left at the team level or the company level. There's no one who remembers September 10th. There's people that remember September 11th and afterwards left in the company or battalion area. They learned from those people, but no one remembers how things were. I think we lost continuity. We definitely did lose continuity of how things used to be and what we used to do. And now, are we going to have to make it up again? Probably.
Well, and you said it, because I'll give you the example. When I got to group, it was 2007. When I got to group, I was one of those new guys that were like, boom, you're in Echo, you're deploying. Literally, the sergeant major looked at me. He said, are you married? This is group sergeant major, right? Because the company was already gone. He was like, before I send you down to the battalion, are you married? And I was like, yes, I am. And he's like, your family affairs are good. And I was like, yes, they are. He says, pack your shit. You're leaving in 2 weeks. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, so that was like the first thing for me. But now when I got in the country, right, which was in Iraq again, when I got in the country, it was like the receiving sergeant major was like, we thought you were a Delta. And I'm like, nope, I'm an Echo. And they were like, oh, we need Echoes too. So they just used me, a team would, need an extra Echo somewhere. Boom, you're going there. You're going there. And I did that. But when I got back, it was kind of, if you want to say, like you said, that continuity of people sitting there saying, hey, sure, there's a GWAT, but also too, this is what we do. Like, this is the other spectrum. Like, this isn't going on. This is what we're doing in different countries throughout our AOR. That's where, for me, I had the opportunity to understand, right? But also, too, at the same time, I'm trying to prove myself because I'm a new guy, right? And not only am I a new guy, I'm an E7. So now people are really, really judging me, right? And that became into, believe it or not, because being in the regular Army during, if you want to say, no money time, right? I knew how to bang, bang, I knew how to do all those things that were at this point kind of like alleviated for, the SF community, because they were in full GWAT. And so, believe it or not, when there were times throughout my where we started kind of like going back and forth, like, hey, this is downtime. We don't have money because we're spending it on GWAT stuff. I was able to adapt and have, people on my team and understand and stuff like that to where, believe this or not, they were like, I had a nickname for a long time was like regular Army Zeus, because that's what I had learned for, almost, 8 years of my life. This is how you make shit happen with minimal shit, because big Army, you ain't getting shit. You're getting to be there from, O dark 30 to O dark 30, sitting on your hands until some squad leader, some platoon sergeant says, oh, by the way, we forgot you got to go clean the motor pool. And be like, dude, it's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Why didn't you tell me that at 9? So like you said, that continuity, it is now becoming, if you want to say, I believe, I don't know, I'm not there, but off of just the remark that you just said, off of talking with people, yeah, that continuity is going to hurt now, because now is like what I said, is now we have to explain what truly our mission is and how we do it with minimal support, if you want to say, or money.
Yeah.
Mental health on a high pedestal, especially now in the military, with all of, the suicides and the potential suicides and, all these things that people are now starting to bring up. But we are required to get a physical once a year in the military, right? Or when you go to school, you're required to get a physical. Why don't we ever make it a requirement to go talk to somebody, when literally our jobs as operators is, one, and we hear it all the time. I know you probably heard it. I know I heard it through my entire operator career, is we want to keep you mentally and physically sharp. And like you said, is this, right, plays heavier than anything else physically, right? If your mentals aren't right, the rest will follow. I mean, it's a fact, you know. Sure, your body will toughen through things, but once your mind goes, the rest follows. You know, the will to live, right? If you stop willing to live, your mind and your body will quit. You know, so I always looked at it like that. Especially when I got out, I really started looking at, like, how, if you want to say, I started playing back the tape. Like, where did I go wrong? Where did you go wrong? And I realized that perception at that time in my career of, like, hey, just get through it, that quote unquote, if you say something, you're going to be judged, or if you say something, you may not be operational anymore, or they'll take you off deployment status, or whatever the case may be. When I look back on it, that's where I think I should have been honest with myself and honest on those surveys, if you want to say, because maybe it might have changed a little bit because I would have been talking to people a lot earlier rather than trying to deal with it when the dam broke, it broke. But, like I said, that's unfortunately, I would have loved to go to 30 years. I had the aspirations to be in, first group sergeant major's position right now. And I was on that path, I'd taken over a company. I'd already did, the S3 sergeant major. Was looking to be next battalion CSM. But like I said, at that juncture, when all that started to come into fruition, then the floodgates just let loose. And at that time, that's when it was like, hey, if you want to say, you got to hit the bricks, But do I take any of my career back? No, I loved every bit of it. Before, in order to go even try out in, like I said, that was about 2004, going into 2005, you had to be a specialist. It was, you couldn't just go. You had to be a specialist or an E5 to go, or, E4 promotable to go. And so here I am, E7 at selection, and I see this platoon of SOFC kids come in, and it's me, and then there's another operator that's still in the unit now. But here it is, him and I. He's an E6, I'm an E7, and we're looking in this platoon of SOFC kids, plus, a couple other different MOSs that are coming in, but we're like, if you want to say, I call it like we were like the old men of the group because here it is, you got these thoroughbred people that have been, like, created into machines by getting smoked and, degraded for, I don't know, months, going to SOPSI. And so, like, if you want to say, that's when I was like, man, talking with some of them guys, they were like, yeah, this is what we do every day. This is nothing, type of thing. And so, of course, I'm thrashing, I'm giving what I got, keeping up with these, if you want to say, younger kids that don't really know the military because they're coming straight in the SOPSI program. And if you want to say, that was kind of like, for me, it was kind of good because it was like, man, these kids, this is all they do is train for this, and here it is, I'm doing like the big Army 9 to 5, and I'm able to keep up with these kids because at that point, like I said, it was, where I was is, you had a couple of people that were really in shape. And then, of course, you had your stragglers that you were trying to get in shape and make sure they're, doing the right thing as far as being, if you want to say, a light fighter in a mechanized world. So to see this platoon of SOPC kids come in, I was just like, it was a breath of fresh air to me. So I was like, hell yeah, all these kids are getting at it. I love it. This is where I want to be. Got selected. And of course, went back to Fort Lewis, and that's when I got the other taste of, like I said, and my command was like, hey, you made selection. So, I got told by multiple people, this is career suicide, because I was an E7. They told me, this is career suicide. You'll never amount to anything in special forces. And so I was like, thanks, guy.
Cool, bro.
Thanks for the motivation. Thanks for the inspiration of saying, hey, you want to do bigger and better things, for the military. I would have rather heard that rather than, like, you're not going to make it. This is career suicide. And then, like I said, at the end of the day, I went through selection or the queue, and I was supposed to be a Delta. And at that time, I never get it. We're all in formation right in front of the big building. The instructor comes out and he was like, from here over, make a formation. From here over, make a formation. So we split up, and he was like, you all are now Deltas, you all are now Echoes. And we were like, okay. And so I started the course, and then because I was in E7, they said that I had to have an MOS change by this date or I was going to go back to the big army because it was needs of the military at that point. So I jumped. I was like 2.5 weeks behind in the Echo course. And so I literally pretty much stayed out with the Echo committee for like a week, catching up. And then I tested to catch up where the class was. So that way I can meet the date. And then from there, man, it was getting it. I knew that's where I wanted to be. My heart was there. I knew that was going to be my new purpose. And I wanted to be around those type of people that were like-minded.
What's the best piece of advice that you received during your career?
Best piece of advice that I received in my career is constantly learn and never quit. And that was told to me by a sergeant major in SF. Never forget to stop learning. When you stop learning, then you get complacent, and complacent kills, of course. But also, too, is to never quit. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean that you can't do it. So never let that come into your mind. It was like, well, he told me I couldn't do it, so I got to quit. Looking back at my career now, that's what kind of fueled me, is when people were like, oh, like I said, that guy told me, this is a career suicide for you. The hell it is. So I'm going to prove you wrong.
All right, last one, man. What were you afraid of then, and what are you afraid of now?
Failure. Every day, my thing is not to fail my family. And it was back then, it was the same thing, but also too, I didn't want to fail my troops or fail my teammates. And then after that, it was like fail the operators, period, or fail the community, because they've invested time in me. They invested in my potential of what I could be. And so I just want to make sure that I give everything every day. And so that's literally why I wake up and give everything every day to the people that I love or the people that mean the most to me. And while I was in, people that meant the most to me were my brothers. Now, since I'm retired, the people that still and was then mean the most to me is my family.
I think you're doing just fine down there in South Carolina. I really appreciate you coming on the show, brother. How can everybody find you on the socials if they so choose?
I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. And yeah, I'm not a real socials person. This gym has Instagram as well. I'm on there every once in a while to give like a trainer tip Tuesday or something like that. But besides that, Facebook and Instagram, man.
For me,
No, man. Like I said, continue doing what you're doing, man. I really appreciate the time, honestly. Like I said, just listening to some of your content, I was like, man, I would like to sit down with this dude and just talk to him, regardless if I, knew you or not. It's just because I like the interaction you're having with current operators, that are retired, because it gives a different perspective. And in life, we need all the perspectives we can to make the best judgment calls and also to be the best version of ourselves. And like I said, you getting on telling your story, others getting on telling their story is just, like I said, it's just a Rolodex for people to pull from and say, hey, maybe I might be going through that. And yeah, I remember this segment saying this. And, like you say, is this person may know this person, and that's how we help each other. That's how we literally take care of one another.
only takes one piece of information to help somebody out. We'll, and I
Yes,
put a lot of them out. So
sir.
hopefully doing well for my guests and things like that. So again,
So what'd you work out
I really
today?
appreciate you coming on. Today, what was the most of all the roles, of all your leadership roles, what was the most rewarding of all of them that you have?
Team Sergeant. And I say that because I don't know, man. It's just like one of those things. It's like, how do you gauge, right, success as an operator, right? So, like for me, to be a leader, dude, and be like, okay, we have this mission set. I can send any one of my guys, literally any one of my guys, into X country with 4 other guys. So half my ODA, and they can get stuff done like a full ODA, like professionally, and uphold the standards that we've taught each other, right? And I say we because I learned things from them, right? How to communicate, how to look at a different perspective. It wasn't just all me, right? It was a collective team transformation. And to have a guy go out there and E6, E5, to go in front of a colonel and pretty much talk that colonel through his mind thinking, and then also integrate that within our soft operations or our soft initiatives of what we need done. To me, that was rewarding. And then also too is to see the development and them getting promoted, man. And I see it in even some of the operators on my team, when they talk to their buddy across the street that they went through, SOPC or they went through, selection with, they'd be like, dude, what do you mean you don't know how to do that? I'm like, dude, that's like an everyday thing in our team room, because like I said, as operators, I think that's where sometimes I think people forget, like you're coming into an environment that expects a lot of you, but also too, that individual is expecting you to teach them because you're a teacher. At the end of the day, you're a teacher, right? Sure, you can get in a suit and a tie during the day and then put muzzle to mouth at night, but at the end of the day, you're a teacher. So if you're not teaching people, then you're not ever going to see the standards that you want because you're telling them to quote unquote figure it out. Sure, you can tell them to figure it out, but you also have to be a backstop to be like, hey, I see you're looking at going in this direction. Now let me help you and kind of guide you back to center line, so that way you understand like, hey, yeah, I see where you're going with that, but use what's around you. And so that to me was the biggest thing on being on a team. And then of course, just most rewarding. And of course it's just like, dude, I mean, it's like, being on a team, to me, that's a high pinnacle. I could be a sergeant major in the Army. I'm still going to say team life was the best time for me. Being a team sergeant and being in charge of 12 barrel chested freedom fighters, man, is like, to me, it was like, that's awesome. And to still have some of those relationships with some of those guys and their families, to me, I'm just like, dude, but it really, really came to fruition when I retired because people spoke and I never knew really the perception that people had about me because you never know. You hope that they have good perception of you, but like some of the guys were like truly like heartfelt. This is what I feel about this dude. And, it's a shame that he's retiring, but, wish the best for him. So that to me is like I said, that's been the most rewarding thing.
It's different when you're a private in the Army. It's different when you're a private in the Army.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the team room's addictive, man. The team room's addictive. That beer fridge, the new guys always got it stocked. The beer light's on. You got your buddies. You don't have to be there. You kind of want to be there. But you had a Friday, had a tough week. The sacrifice, right? First thing we talked about is like the family sacrifice. Then you're like, I got to give back to my wife. You're sacrificing their time and you're not even asking them. We did that. Everybody, we all did that. We asked them to sacrifice their time and their life. And we didn't even ask them. We just like, yeah, this is just how it is. And some, not all, some of the time consuming activities that we would get ourselves in are completely made up. We created those. Like that didn't have to happen. We're finding more ways to stay away from home or to stay busy and create a higher op tempo than it actually is. Like it's bad enough as it is. A couple guys have come on here and said, I couldn't have white space or I would fucking lose it. And whether that white space was just tightening up the fucking white space. So they would take time to make the calendar to just clean it up. Right. And that's like the ultimate in busy work, right? And so some of these problems, again, the other side of things are completely made up by us as well. And that's not helped by drinking. Every time I ruined my life was because I was drinking. And that too. And that paired with traumatic brain injury, that's not helping anybody at all. Ever.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another thing too, when I transitioned on the military that's when I really realized that I busy myself. Like it doesn't have to get done. But I'm so used to busying myself to where, it took me, and I mean, my wife brought it up as well. It was like, why are you doing that today? And I would be like, because it needs to get done. But she was like, really? Does it need to get done today? Or, can you take a moment and maybe spend time with your daughter and just put that to the wayside? So, that was a very realization of exactly what you're saying of like, man, now that I think about it, like I used to busy myself a lot, for whatever reason, it wasn't like that I didn't love my family, but I would busy myself to where it'd be like, I could go home at 4, but I ended up going home at 6, because it's like you said, it's like I had to do something or I felt that something was more important than taking that 1 hour off early, to go home and invest in that and then come back to whatever it is the next day, right? Because it's just like anything, right? When you're on a team, through group, through SWIG, everything else, right? It's priorities. Everybody's like priorities. It's like, well, that's crazy because you can only tackle one priority at a time. You can say you can multitask, but truly your focus has to be in one area, especially in the line of business that we do. You have to take everything one thing at a time and literally dial it in. That's where we kind of make our money. That's where we want detailed planning so important, right? So like I totally agree with you, man. It is, and it's an eye opener when you, like you said, you step away and you really start to reflect, and you're like, now I see the light. Man, if I would have just known that when I was in, or when I was going through it. But like you said, you're so consumed, and you're trying to be in the moment. You're not as present as you think you are.
Yeah.
So me and my squad went in to eat, and all my teammates were already sat down, and I was walking, I had my tray in hand, and of course, you got a couple TVs, and I saw this clipping of a plane actually hitting the tower, and I was like, what is this? Because it was like, the ticker was on, so I knew it was news. I was like, where is this at? And all the rest of everybody else was kind of like, just eating breakfast, just like normal. And then all of a sudden we see the second one go in. I was like, oh man. And then shortly after that, I think it was like maybe 30 minutes, we were about to start gearing up to start heading back to the company area. There was a couple of runners that came into the chow hall saying, you need to report to your platoon sergeants immediately. And then all of Fort Lewis got locked down. And then, of course, they were being in a first. I understand what DRF status was, right? Being constantly ready to get out. But we had started, if you want to say, the DRF status. So we were packing our bags and stuff like that, just in the case, because like I said, at that point, here it is, you had this vehicle that at that time, General Shinseki had put into the military. And in my mind, I was like, well, if there's any other time to try to test this vehicle that you spent all this money by bringing people in, this is probably going to be the time. And big as shit, they started getting right there, on JBLM. They started prepping the vehicles on the C5s and stuff like that. And then next you know, it was the hurry up and wait game. So we sat, locked down on post in our company areas, just waiting to see if we were going to get a call. And of course, we didn't get a call because at that time, who they're calling. And they're calling like 82nd, Ranger Battalion, all these people that not this first 23rd Infantry at the time, they weren't calling us yet, so we got told to stand down. But then that got into a more, if you want to say, all the leaders now became, instead of like that hip pocket training, to where now it's like more defined training of like, we are, battle drill 1 alpha, and we are going to do it to perfection, and then also, we started implement the vehicles a lot more, and the training, if you want to say, kind of got anteed up a little bit more. Right now we're doing more live fires, and in Big Army, that's like, to me, it's like an act of Congress, because you got to go through, bang, 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 blank, 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 one live fire, go, type of thing. That's just how it is. But it became, hey, we're going to do blanks and then live fire, and so to me, I knew it was like, okay, hey, this might be real. We might actually get the opportunity to go do this, And so that became if you want to say, became the appetite throughout all the leadership at every level of like, hey, now we need to kind of like, if you want to say, dial it up a little bit, because we're going to get the call. We just don't know when,
How did you feel about imposter syndrome at this point too?
Oh, dude, it was definitely heavy. I was like, wait a minute, I'm in the same company, one, right? Which, like I said, is usually they push you to another company. So I'm in the same company. So now I'm back in front of people that I used to be side by side with, or that I know have been in the company for a while. But once again, like I said, is at that time too, I think everybody understood who I was and what I was about. So when I took over the company, it was real easy. I brought in my team sergeant, my team leaders, and we sat in the conference room, kind of went over and said, hey, I understand some of you guys have worked with me before. I said, but now you're working for me. I said, and I don't want it to be uncomfortable between anybody. I'm here still to help you get out the door as fast as possible, or do whatever you need to do within your calendar, within your training cycle, within your your deployment cycle. However, I'm going to hold the company to standard, right? Of like, I don't want, 100 calls coming for something minute that you can control on your team. So once again, I'm giving you the freedom right now to run your team the way you need to run your teams, because I'm not a micromanager like that, because like I said, coming into this, the very first day in selection was, I'm going to tell you what I need. You just do it. Big boy rules. And so literally it was kind of uncomfortable at the beginning, because the previous sergeant major would have like 2 or 3 meetings a week. Yeah, I nixed all that. I said, we're going to have 1 meeting a week. And I said, it's going to be for an hour and a half. I said, the first 30 minutes is going to be me and the commander speaking of what we need, how we need it, and assigning it to the team that it belongs to. The hour after that is for us to go through. And this is where I think it was kind of like a shocker to some, because I would have the school's NCO, I'd have the S1, I'd have all the S shops, a representative in there, I'd have FSC in there, BSC in there, and then literally we just go down the line of like, hey, Team X, what issues, gripes, complaints do you have? Where then this is where people will be like, oh, this person's pay is messed up. This DTS hadn't been approved. Yeah, yeah. And I'd have them, all those shops in there. Like, that's your job. Also, too, the great thing about that is I had just came off the first art. So a lot of those guys knew me already in those S shops, to where it's like, hey, Sergeant Major Zeus is telling us, like, we got to tighten up this company, all their stuff. And so I made sure that integration, to where it was a touch point with every person that belonged to in that perspective. And then once we went through kind of like that, then I would talk about like, hey, what are you hearing on your teams? Like what's gripes, complaints, and then that's when I kind of like really dove into truly getting down to all the teams and understanding the personalities and personnel on that team. So, we had a guy that he was having some marital issues. His mind wasn't in the game. So, he was showing up late, he wasn't focused and stuff like that. So, I made it a point to like help the team sergeant get him to the right place, so that way he can deal with that. We put him up at B team for a minute just so he can deal with that situation. Didn't kick him off the team, just got him there so that way he'd have the freedom and space to do what he needed to do, and then we would turn him back to the team. Team sergeants that, didn't understand things, I made it a point to sit down with them at length to kind of coach and educate and mentor them on like, hey, this is something you might want to look at. Yada, yada. This is what Big RV is looking at. This is what you're looking at. And it just became do that. So we're out in like I said, mass formation. And he was just like, is there anybody in this formation that can go to Ranger School right now and pass? And, just like Big Army, I was like, huh? Oh. And he was like, who is that? Front and center. So I broke ranks and I ran up front. And then he kind of talked to me. He was just like, you think you can go to Ranger School? And you think you can pass? I was like, roger that. And he goes, what makes you so certain? I said, because I'm a light fighter through and through. And he goes, all right. He was like, I want you to go over to the S3 shop. They're going to get you orders and you're going to go. And so I go to Ranger School and make it through all the phases. First time go, end up getting distinguished honor grad and came back. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I'm not going to fail. Well, first of all, I'm not going to fail a PT test. I don't care how many. You can keep saying 0 and I'm still going to pump them out the same way that I did on the first one. And, running I'm a good runner. So I was like, I'm not going to fail that. I said, you're literally going to have to drop me because of another reason. It's not going to be because I can't make it or I lose a patrol. And to me, school was more of a leadership school more than actual, if you want to say, tactics. Yeah, you do tactics, you do op orders and stuff like that. But to me, it was more of a leadership school. And I think that's where, kind of like how I told you, before, is like, that's where I'm wired a little differently, right? So as a leader, I really try to get down, like you said, the higher you go up, the less people try to get down to the lowest level. I always made sure that I got down to the lowest level. And if someone didn't understand something, I took the time to make sure that they understood it and why they were doing it. And that was the biggest thing that I had learned from Big Army is people were telling me what to do, but they never told me why I'm doing it. And so when I went to Ranger School, it was getting a group of people to do what you needed them to do, right? Under, of course, the extremes of, sleep deprivation and maybe no food, and to me, it was very easy bringing those people together because everybody wants to pass, right? So that's how I would talk to them like, hey, man, y'all want to pass? Do it this way. They give you a Ranger handbook for a reason. Don't deviate. It's not that hard. So that's how I took everything in the military. Military is not meant for you to fail, ever. It's up to you to fail. They're gates, if you want to say, that put your glide path to success. But it's up to you to mentally get over that, physically get over that, whatever the case may be, depending on what you're doing. And so for me to go to Ranger School and I guess if you want to say display like truly how Fort Campbell raised me of being if you want to say a tactician, but then also having the ability to have that insight of what bad leaders are and to kind of hone that in for myself and say, hey, this is how I want to be a better leader than some of the leaders that I had. And so how do I do that? And I started realizing that people of course, just want to be talked to as people. And 90% of people just don't understand why they're doing something. So they don't give you their all. Like, why am I doing it? Understand it? So that's what I started implementing, if you want to say, in my leadership style, and I'll say his name because he was a great mentor to me. It was Matt Sergeant. He now is like a free fall person out there at Lewis. And he literally was the first true interaction with a Green Beret that I had. He brought me in. He said, listen, I know you understand infantry tactics and you understand Big Army. He says, but you have a lot of road that you got to cover before you go through the Q course. And if you get through the Q course, being in your pay grade, you're going to be expected to come on the ground running. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that means. So he was like, what you're going to do is, and that time they were doing pre-scuba training. So I got introduced to that, which was, I love swimming, but I'm going to be real with you, man. Like,
that's not swimming. That's not swimming.
I was like,
for everybody, anybody listening at home that's like, oh, swimming, yeah, I'm good at swimming. No, you can be, no, fuck, that ain't swimming. That's just fucking torture.
Yeah. And then I got to integrate with the team, but he specifically was like, hey, he gave me like SF manuals essentially. And he says, you need to start reading about what we do on this side. And so that's what I did. I took that to heart because, like I said, he was allowing me the opportunity to even be on his team, as, if you want to say, an observer. And then because they were like, hey, do you know what MOSs you chose and stuff like that? And I said, yeah, I chose, because they told me I was going to be a Delta, at the beginning. I said, this is what I'm going to be. And then they were like, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll just have you tag along with that MOS. And, and at that time, it was a total of 8 people on the team that he had on the team at that time. And so I got to be able to see and do everything with them. And then, of course, every day he was trying to break me off when it came to PT because he was just like, I can't let you get soft before you go to the Q course. That was his mentality. He was also one of those guys that was like, don't speak to me until you're spoken to, type of thing. Even if I had a question, I'd have to wait until, you spoke to me. And then I'd be like, hey, by the way, since I got your attention right now, I have a question about X, Y, and Z. But I had the opportunity to OJT. And then I came down on my orders and then we came out before Bragg, So
it's got to be cool experience to just hang out and see the other side of things, even if you're just doing whatever bullshit tasks and shit like that. That's got to be pretty cool.
Well, it was. Yeah, and it was, and so being in that was, I call that like my true start to SF. I never forgot that. There's a lot of people that are like, but I always, no matter what, even throughout my career, I always thought about all the shit leaders that I had and how it's not going to be like that. And how, honestly, how I wasn't going to let any rank ever change who I was. And so that was the biggest thing that throughout my entire career that I stood beside. I was like, I don't care. I'm still a dude. I tie my boots the same way you do. It's just in this organization that we both work for, right? There's a structure that has to be from top to bottom. And it just so happened to be I'm climbing up the structure, you know. But yeah, then went to selection or went to the Q course and made through the Q course. And like I said, came back and got assigned to 2nd Battalion. And but then it came to where it was like, boom, you know, BSC, that's where you're going to be. You're going to be the first sergeant for BSC. And that, I believe, like I changed, for at least 2nd Battalion, I changed the mentality between operator and support, because I went down to every company. I talked to every detachment. I talked to every company sergeant major. I talked to every commander and said, rights, wrongs, or indifference about support cell. Tell me what you think. And this is all within the first like 2 weeks of me being the first sergeant. So everybody gave me their gripes, grumps, you know, complaints. And then I said, okay, I've heard that piece. What would you like to see? And everybody took that. And so literally I went in, and me and the commander at that time, he was from the 2nd, came over, you know, so he understood, you know, regular Army standards, etc. And so I said to the entire formation, I said, you guys are going to understand why your job's important, but why you are truly here. And that is to support operators. This is a very privileged thing that you're allowed to do, because as you all know, you're not over in the big Army world, you know, getting beat up and stuff like that, getting demoralized, you know, because of X, Y, and Z. But here are the standards. If you can't meet these standards, I'll get a 4187 to get you back to one of those big Army. And so holding people accountable again, especially the support cell, became, it ruffled a lot of feathers. And when I mean we were doing the same stuff, convoy training, we were, you know, SUT training and stuff like that. I said, because you don't know, I don't care if you're 42 Alpha, I don't care if you're a 92 Yankee, you're going to get a call to be like, hey, I need one of these on this detachment, and you're going to have to operate with them. And you don't know what that's going to look like. And when we started doing that, it became the understanding of, even with the leadership of those support cells, I was taking that time, me and my commander were taking that time to talk to them and say, hey, you need to start getting into the companies. Stop sitting behind your desk and find out what they truly need and how they want to see it done. That's how you become integrated. We started doing that, and BSC, that started leaking over to FSC. And then next thing you know, the entire support cell was like, the entire battalion was loving it, because they were like, oh, you know, and it was like, you know, like I said, it was a phone call, right? Operator to operator, right? It was like, hey, Zeus, this dude is shit. Don't worry about it. Send him back. I got one for you. And I'd go. That person would come, and I'd be like, yo, what's wrong with you? You know, I gave you your opportunity. You were at the bat. You were at bat, and you struck out, you know, and then we corrected. And so that became a big thing, to where, like I said, back again, people were like, that's that regular Army side of them coming out now, because I had to put my brain back into like regular Army, because now I'm dealing with soldiers, right? Again, you know, like lower enlisted soldiers of all pay grades, you know, and their leadership. And I'm having to do the same thing of what I used to do, of how do I get them to do what's needed at a high standard. And I will say that as a first sergeant, even though I call it like the appreciation tour, right? You go over, you be first sergeant, and yeah, you're around operators, but you're truly not around operators, because you're around everything else, and you're having to deal with big Army shit. I really enjoyed that job. A lot of people won't say it, but I really enjoyed being a first sergeant. Because I actually got to see the difference between the integration between these kids that were coming in that didn't understand how privileged they are to be a group, you know, compared to the big Army, and the integration of operators getting exactly what they want, right? Because I believe, like, hey, support cell, they allow us freedom to do what we need to do. That was always my mentality. But if you don't have a crap support cell, then you end up doing it, and you'll find a way to do it. Might not be the most effective or efficient way, but you're going to find a way to do it, because that's what just SF operators do, you know? So
yeah, you're going to figure it out one way or another. So so you said you ran into a special forces unit while you were deployed. What was that experience like? Did they roll up on an ATV, say 21 days to a better life, and then get the fuck out of there?
No, what's called, so like I said, we were doing their route security, pretty much just making sure everything was good. They came in, man, and they were on Humvees at that time, where, you know, they were open Humvees. They had these little rails on the side where, like, dudes were hanging off the rails, and literally they go in, they hit this objective, and then boom, they're out. And I was like, yo, who are these dudes? Like that to me, I was like, that was badass, because we wouldn't do anything like that. First,
Had you not seen any fifth group guys at Campbell up to this point
well,
when you
I
were there?
had seen them, but it was not a lot of like interaction because they kept to themselves and whatnot. So I think I talked to one fifth group dude when I was in Lurs at 101st. And the only reason why is because they were jumping in with us to do their own little thing. So pretty much they were dovetailing off of our aircraft, you know. But and I was in Iraq. We went back to the fob, and I didn't know that they were on the north end of the fob. So when I was there, I kind of like went up there because at that time, you had to call home. You had to sit in line for a payphone or one of those little MWR phones. You only got 10 minutes to talk or whatever, right? So that was on the north side of the fob over there in Fob, Mosul. And so I went there. They had a gated community, just, gated off and stuff like that. And so I had asked one of the guys that were coming out here, it was a support guy. I said, hey, man, I was like, can I talk to somebody in there? I want to know like what it's like to do what they do, And the support guy was like, well, I don't think they're going to talk to you, man, because you're just a regular Army dude, And so
Typical support guy thing to say. Where I'd have been like, yeah, fuck yeah. What does he want to know, man? You want to.
Yes, the support guy's like, well, I don't think they're going to talk to you because you're a regular Army guy. So I'm just like, huh, all right, But then we saw them. They were getting ready, and we were, of course, going up there, getting our vehicles ready. And I jumped out and I talked to one of the operators, and I was like, hey, man, like, what is it that y'all actually do? And they were like, oh, well, we do a lot of, DA hits right now, and stuff like that. And then he was just like, but if you're interested, man, he's like, where you from? And I told him, and he was just like, oh, there's got to be a recruiter up there. You need to go talk to them, And so in my mindset, I was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna find where this recruiter is because I was like, dude, they were, kit was different. It wasn't like, our kit where like everything's uniform on your kit. Like everybody's got the same magazine, same place, same pin, same place, same first aid pouch, same plate. It wasn't like that. It was literally something I was like, man, that makes sense to me. Like not everybody is the same. They don't pull the same. They don't do all the same stuff. So I was like, man, that makes sense. So I was like, man, I gotta figure this out. I gotta go. So we did like 2 more missions with them. I didn't get to see them the second or third time because I was in a different position. But the first time I saw them, they had rolled on in, like I said, soft skin Humvees with these rails on the side. They jumped off, did this hit, had a couple of pucks, and then boom, they were out. And so I just thought, I was like, man, that's legit. And